Welcome back to 100 Days and Beyond. I'm Dudley Peacock, and this is episode 25, the final episode of week 5 and the closing episode of the first 25 episode arc of the show. This week has been about the authority layer, the part of the business that most founders never take seriously, and that separates the compounding operators from the grinding ones. We talked about Podcasters Pipeline on Monday, Homepage Hero Video on Tuesday, the avatar question on Wednesday, and the compounding curve yesterday. Today, I want to close the arc with the question I get asked more than any other by founders who have built a show and want to understand how it actually makes money. How do I convert a listener into a client? Specifically, how do I convert the kind of listener who has been with me for 8 months into a £50,000 engagement without sitting through 50 sales calls a month? The answer, honestly, is that you do not sell to them at all. Let me walk you through what you do instead. The first thing to understand is that the listener relationship is fundamentally different from any other marketing relationship, and the rules of selling that work in cold outbound do not apply here. In fact, they work against you. A listener who has spent 40 episodes with you has self-selected into your worldview. They already know your thesis on transformation. They already know your pricing philosophy. They already know whether they want to work with you. What they do not know is whether they are ready and whether now is the right time. If you apply conventional sales technique to this person, a qualifying call, a discovery framework, a pitch deck, you break the relationship. You signal that you now see them as a prospect instead of a listener. That signal is felt as a downgrade, and the emotional quality of the relationship immediately changes for the worse. I have seen founders lose a 6-month listener in a single sales call because they went into full salesperson mode and the listener felt the shift. What works with listeners is the opposite posture. You treat them at every point as a peer who might or might not choose to work with you, and you let them lead the pace. The conversion mechanism has to be built into the content itself, not bolted on the outside. The show has to contain somewhere the specific invitation to work together, stated clearly and then not repeated. In every episode I do, the outro ends with subscribe wherever you are listening. That is the soft call to action. Once every 10 to 15 episodes, I replace that with a harder call. If you are ready for a transformation diagnostic, book a 30-minute call at erpsolutions.co.za. I do not hammer the call. I do not repeat it. I just make sure that if a listener who has been with me for 6 months decides they want to work with me today, they know the next step without having to hunt for it. That is the whole conversion mechanism from the show side. Low frequency, clear, specific. The listeners who are not ready, skip over it. The listeners who are ready, book. The close rate on those bookings is extraordinarily high, typically between 30 and 60%, because the listener has already done the qualification work during the listening. When a listener books, the first call they have with you is not a sales call, it is a diagnostic. This framing is critical, and it is the thing most founders get wrong. A sales call has a close as its objective. A diagnostic has a true diagnosis as its objective. The listener arrives expecting to talk about their transformation problem. You spend 30 to 45 minutes actually diagnosing it. You use the frameworks you talk about on the show: constraint analysis, the 4 accelerators, the 3 models. You give them genuine value in that call. At the end of the call, you do one of 2 things. If the diagnosis reveals work you can do, you describe what you would do in detail with rough pricing, and you ask if they want to explore a formal proposal. If the diagnosis reveals work you cannot do, or that does not need doing, you tell them that honestly, and you recommend a different path. The second outcome is the one that earns you a referral 6 months later. The listener leaves the call either with a proposal conversation in motion or with a clear diagnosis that was worth their time regardless. You have not sold them anything. You have diagnosed, recommended, and invited. That is a posture of peer consultation, and it is the posture the relationship requires. If the diagnostic leads to a proposal, the proposal writes itself because the listener has already been pre-sold on your thinking by the library. You do not need to explain your methodology in the proposal. They have heard you explain it 40 times. You do not need to justify your pricing philosophy. They have heard you talk about it in episode 12. You do not need to build a case for transformation over patching. They agree with you on that, or they would not have booked. The proposal contains exactly three things: the current state reality, as you now understand it from the diagnostic; the future state outcome, with a specific measurable success metric and a date; the price; and the commercial terms, including any guarantee language. Proposals written like this are short, 2 to 4 pages. They convert at rates that sales teams writing cold proposals cannot comprehend, because 90% of the persuasion happened in the back catalog of the show before the proposal was even requested. This model compounds in a way that traditional sales cannot. Every episode you ship permanently improves the close rate on every future listener sourced deal, because the library is doing the persuasion work at scale before the first conversation ever happens. Traditional sales is a per deal cost. You invest time in every prospect, every pitch, every proposal. Content-led sales is a fixed cost, the library, amortized over every future deal. Over a 2-year horizon, the economics diverge significantly. Content-led sales businesses deliver more margin per salesperson, shorter sales cycles, higher win rates, and lower cost of acquisition than their outbound-led competitors. For a mid-market services business, this is the single most important strategic shift available in 2026. Build the library, embed the offer, run diagnostics, not pitches, write proposals that assume the persuasion already happened. That is the whole model, and any founder who commits to it for 2 years ends up with a business that looks nothing like their competitors' businesses in the best possible way. That is the end of week 5 and the end of the first 25 episode arc of 100 Days and Beyond. If you have listened to all 25, you now have the framework for diagnosis, the framework for CFO-led design, the framework for AI-enabled build, and the framework for content-led growth. That is the whole thing. Use it. That's episode 25, and that closes week 55 and the first 25 episode arc of 100 Days and Beyond. This week was the Wave arc, Podcasters Pipeline as the trust engine, Homepage Hero Video as the highest leverage digital asset, the avatar question resolved honestly, the compounding curve, and why you have to survive the first 50 episodes, and today, the show to shipping path, how listeners convert into clients without ever being sold to, through diagnostics, not pitches, and through proposals that write themselves because the library already did the persuasion. Next week, the arc continues into week 6. If this whole series has been useful, subscribe wherever you are listening. Share an episode with somebody who needs the thinking, and I will see you Monday. Thanks for watching, and have a good weekend.